Hi, everybody. Just want to welcome you all tonight to our Freshwater Fisheries Forum. My name is Kristen Maestrel, and I'm the Assistant Director with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. And before we dive into tonight's topics, I just want to go over a couple of highlights that we have from the past year. So first and foremost, our freshwater fishing license sales were up by nearly 5%, and the trout stamps were up by about 2.5% over last year, which is particularly exciting for all of us because that means that even more people are getting out there and enjoying the great sport of fishing and experiencing all that New Jersey has to offer. So definitely keep it up and keep spreading the word and invite your friends and family out to get out on the water and cast a line in. Now, we have also made some legislative and language changes to our buddy fishing license program. So this allows us to finally offer the program as it was originally intended, which is to inspire more people to get out there and try fishing, maybe even for the first time. So in 2025, if you are a returning angler and you have up to 2 new anglers, if you purchase a buddy fishing license together, you'll receive a substantial discount. Now, a returning angler is someone who has purchased a fishing license at least once in the last 5 years. And a new angler is someone who has either never purchased a fishing license before or someone who has purchased a fishing license, who has not purchased a fishing license within the last 5 years. So please spread the word, encourage your friends and family to take advantage of this program and introduce them to freshwater fishing here in New Jersey. We're also excited to announce that we hired a biologist to serve as our statewide aquatic invasive species coordinator. Her name is Samantha McQueston, and she will be overseeing the New Jersey Aquatic Invasive Species Management Plan, which will help to coordinate efforts to monitor, manage, and prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. We also hope that you were able to tune in to our webinar last time in January to learn about some of the changes we're proposing for the 2026 fishing regulations with the goal of simplifying regulations, protecting the resources, and providing great opportunities for fishing. But if you did miss that webinar, you can go to our website and find the recording and rewatch it right there. Now, tonight's webinar will focus on warm water and cool water fisheries. We'll have the opportunity for you all to ask questions and provide some feedback. We will be hosting one additional virtual meeting in March. So that'll be Tuesday, March 11th. Will be our annual trout meeting where we'll hear all about Pequest Trout Hatchery, the trout stocking program, and some updates on wild trout resources. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Bureau Chief, Sean Kraus, to make a couple more announcements and some housekeeping.
Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate that introduction. I'm excited for this meeting tonight. These public virtual meetings began in the year 2003. So this is the 22nd consecutive year of having these meetings. They're an important part of what we do because not only are we excited to kind of share what's going on, within the fishing realm, but also to get feedback from anglers. So this is intended to be an interactive meeting. We have 3 very good presenters tonight that are going to talk about various cool water and warm water fishing programs that we have here in New Jersey. And Kristen did a great job, mentioning the upcoming fish code cycle, where we're looking to have some new regs in 2026. I really would like you to hold all questions on things like the fish code or on trout fishing, hold them for another time. We really want to put this entire hour and a half into our warm water and cool water programs. There's a lot of exciting things. As we start, just so you know, there's a whole suite of fisheries biologists and hatchery workers on this call tonight. So if there's a question that your presenter can't answer, I'm sure there's somebody who will be available to do that. So the way we're going to handle questions is we're going to have a presenter. There's going to be a nice PowerPoint presentation. And then at a point, you're going to have the opportunity to raise your virtual hand that's in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. When you raise your hand, we'll have a moderator that's going to call your name. That moderator is going to ask you to unmute yourself at that point. It's key. We can unmute you, but you have to do it from your end as well. So you'll have a chance to ask a question. But I can't stress enough, please keep the question relevant to the information that was provided to you in that talk. And if we get through all these presentations, there's 3 of them, the remainder of the meeting, we're going to open it wide open for anything cool water or warm water related. If you're having technical difficulties, you can shoot an email to dfw.gotomeetings@dep.nj.gov. And you might want to write this number down. You can call or text this number, 609-947-1201, if you're having technical difficulties of any kind. So with that, we're going to get started. The first presenter is going to be Craig Lemon, Superintendent of the Hackettstown Hatchery. And we're going to start with a video on the channel catfish program.
Today, myself and the crew, about 8, 9, 10 of us, we are doing channel cat egg collection. Typically starts around June 1st every year when the water temperatures in the ponds reach about 75 degrees. We put 40, 30-gallon barrels in a 4-acre pond at the bottom of the hatchery. And once a week, we go down there and we kind of sneak up on the barrels. You can see, sometimes you can see the cat sitting there. Typically, if there's a male in front of the barrel outside, then there's a female inside the barrel guarding the eggs. So you kind of sneak up and you can scare them around and lift the barrel up, and sometimes the female comes splashing out and splashes you. Other times you kind of have to reach in, and I always called it New Jersey noodling, like if you're down in the Louisiana noodling. So you get the cat out, the adult, and a lot of times there's egg masses, and they're kind of like frog eggs. They're big gelatinous masses. These channel cats down here in the pond that we're talking about are about 5 years old. So they're 5 to 15 pounds right now. Really nice, 30-inch channels. So the masses can be like 3, 4, 5 pounds of eggs. So we collect them up, we put them in a 5-gallon bucket. And as we walk around the pond, there's usually 3 teams of 2 checking barrels. We get all the masses in 5-gallon buckets, and then we bring them up into our intensive culture building and we weigh them. We have a gram scale. We take an egg mass out of the barrel, put it on a gram scale in a bowl. We take it and we break the small into like baseball sized clumps. And then we add the solution that was developed in Iowa by the state. It's sodium sulfide, a little tiny bit of hydrochloric acid, and water. And that dissolves the matrix. So we have the eggs now broken into baseball sized pieces, and we take a stirring stick and we stir that for like 3 to 5 minutes in that solution. And that breaks down this matrix. Then we inventory them into a graduated cylinder, put the graduated cylinder into cylindrical Donald's hatching jars. And now the eggs are free flowing, and that keeps the eggs swirling in the jar bottom. And it takes 3 to 5 days, depending on how far along the eggs were in the pond. You might have 5 different colors from 5 different days. They only take about 5 days to hatch. It's awesome. It's one of our favorite couple weeks of the year. Everybody says it makes it a game. You reach into the bucket, is there going to be a fish in there? Who gets the most egg masses? It's kind of like one of the fun parts of the year for us. Just trying to get the PowerPoint up on our end. Coming live from the Hackettstown Fish Hatchery right now. And the first slide here is just, some of the slides are a little bit repetitive of what you just saw in the video, but we can talk a little more about them. The history of the catfish program here went in the database. The first listings of stockings was 1979, which was, they were still raising, it was still primarily a trout hatchery then, but there was a couple big 4 or 5 acre ponds that were too warm. The water was too warm to raise trout. So they had bass and catfish and bluegills in there. And that was the first reported stocking of about 6,000 fish. Then I started in '87, and we built a small recirculation system in a brick building, which was the original building from 1912. And that year, now that we could recirculate 80-degree water, we could raise some more fish. And we started off with 16 different waters. In 1999, they built us a large, 10 times bigger than our original facility across the street. and we were able to flow more water through one tank in the new building than we were into 12 tanks in the old building. So our potential to raise bigger and more fish increased. We were raising at some point like 6-inch fish, like 90 different water bodies were stocked. And we had a system where we stocked the east side, coastal waters 1 year, and then the west side, the Delaware River, Delaware Bay side, and the next year. So we were doing 90 water bodies, and each year we were raising like 40,000 fish. And it was met with varying results as far as stocking. We were stocking fish in November, like November 1st, 6-inch catfish. And I think, I was out there stocking myself. I had just started that year, and we were realizing we were going to, end of October, early November, and the water bodies, I remember being at Mount Hope Pond and it was like 38 degrees. And, these little 6-inch cats, we weren't real excited about putting them in there. So in 01, we decided we had a new building with a lot of water and the ability to heat the water. So we said, let's try to hold some of those 6-inch fish over the winter. And then by spring, they were 12 to 14 inches. Springtime, the water temperatures might have been 55, 60, but for the next 8 months, they were going to be rising, and the catfish had a much better chance to survive. So we were excited about that, that part of the program. And then 2011, I think it was probably my decision at that point that we realized, heck, we're spending a lot of money on catfish, holding them over the winter in a hot, running boilers and running the equipment. So we looked into Arkansas down there at in the state of Arkansas at private hatcheries and realized, well, heck, we can buy 6-inch catfish on June 1st and have them delivered here. And we can put them in our big ponds down in the bottom of the hatchery that warm up to 75 to 85 degrees and grow them from June 1st till October 1st and have 12 to 14-inch kind of pond reared catfish. And that in 01 is kind of where the program, or 2011, is where we really started noticing, whether it be at kids fishing derbies, all of a sudden a lot of 16-inch, 18-inch catfish were being caught. And we realized, though, that seems to be the way to go. And we still, from 11 to 25, we've continued that, buying them from Arkansas for, whatever they were, 20 cents a piece, and raising them here outdoors in the ponds, just feeding them, twice a day outside. And that's kind of where we stand currently. One note I wrote down here was, it's probably the most tweaked or modified program. I've been here 38 years at the hatchery, and we've been raising muskie. We raised 15 different species, but it was modified. It was modified to save money, and also to, one of our biggest goals in Fish and Wildlife is to raise fish for you guys to catch and enjoy. And that survivability is a huge part of that. So yeah. I think right now we're going to introduce Tyler Tressler. He's the crew supervisor at the Hackettstown Hatchery. He started full time in 2011, and he's going to go through the daily process beginning on June 1st. We'll go from there.
All right, so if you guys miss it from that nice video we had earlier, like Craig said, around June 1st, we put about 32 barrels in our broodstock channel cat pond. And then one thing we didn't mention in the video was these masses. Typically, there's between 25 and 30,000 eggs per mass, in case you were wondering. And it does vary. Obviously, bigger fish might lay more eggs. Or we actually find out that when the fish actually get older, 4 or 5 years old, they seem to be less productive and lay less eggs, or just don't lay eggs at all. And then we tend to have to swap them out, which we'll get to in a minute. Like you saw in the video, if you look at this picture here, there's a lot of different color yellows here. The red opaque color there are the channel cats that are getting ready to hatch, whereas the bright yellow all the way to the right side are the ones that were just freshly laid. And like we typically check the ponds, Mondays and Fridays when the water temps warm up. So it's oftentimes we get varying colors just because we don't go down and check it every single day. When we go down there and check it, we want to make sure, we hope that we're going to get a lot of eggs at once. And this was all covered in the video, but I'll just go through it real quick. The first thing we do when we bring the masses into the building is we inventory them by weighing them on a gram scale. We then use the solution to break the clumps, or to break the eggs into a free-flowing egg so that they can free flow in hatching jars. Once they're poured off, we measure them, and that's where we inventory them and get the eggs per milliliter, and we actually figure out how many eggs are in each hatching jar. And then, depending on when the eggs were laid, sometimes as we're actually breaking up the masses, the catfish are hatching in our hands, and other times they'll take 5 days if they were just laid that day or the night before. So it really varies with when they're going to hatch. And these are our hatching jars. Water goes down through a pipe and is dispersed through the bottom of the jar. And so the eggs, because we broke up that gelatinous mass, are just rolling in there. It kind of simulates if the catfish was sitting on the eggs in the wild, fanning them with their tail. And on the left side, you'll be able to see the eggs rolling. This is what they look like pre-hatch, before they're going to hatch. And then on the right side in the video, these fish are all hatched. And you can see them, they're actually swimming around in the jars. Once the fish hatch, we put them into 350-gallon circular tanks and start them on dry feed. And then just to switch gears, like Craig was saying, we have two different programs here. We have the 6-inch fish, and then we have the extensive fish that are raised outside in the ponds.
Another load of the 14-inch channels going out of Hackettstown Hatchery today, heading all over the state.
And essentially, we raise these fish. It's varied over the course of the years, from a 1-acre pond to a 5-acre pond. Essentially, when it's time to harvest the fish, we lower the pond level down. We all get in waders. As you can see, we drag a 60-foot heavy-leaded catfish net. And then in this video, you'll see this is how we get the fish out of the pond. You usually have 1 or 2 guys taking nets of the catfish. And then we actually put them in this Mississippi hauling net that we really like to use. And then we'll use the excavator to, as you can see in this picture, lift it up over the tank truck. And it actually has a trap door on the bottom of it. So at the top left picture, you'll see our guy that's up on the truck actually can pull the trap door, and usually about 99% of those fish fall through. You might have to shake it a little bit if one of them gets their barb stuck in the side. And you can see over the years, as the colors of the trucks have changed, but we've really been loving this new method.
Yeah, we love it because for 25, 30 years, we hauled these fish out of the pond bottoms, out of a muddy pond, up the pond banks, into the truck. It was like, a group of, buckets of water going on a fire, basically, and you were talking knee deep to thigh deep mud. So when we went to this system, we were like, wow, maybe we should have done that 20 years ago.
And the best thing about this, besides obviously saving the brack bacon labor, is it actually makes us more efficient. So we used to have to fill all the trucks with water, go down first thing in the morning, net the pond. And because, like Greg was saying, we'd have to net them 1 net at a time and run it up the bank, dump it in the truck. It would take us like 2-3 hours, not 3 hours. It'd take us sometimes up to 2 hours to load the trucks. And because of that, we obviously stock all over the state of New Jersey. There was days where we would net the pond, and then because it was taking so long, we would then put the fish in our building overnight, and then we wouldn't do the South Jersey run until the next day. Now, the way this works is we actually count or we weigh the exact amount of fish into the Mississippi hauling net that we need per tank on the truck. So our smaller trucks have 2 tanks, our bigger trucks have 6. So with 6 swings of the arm of the excavator, that big truck is loaded, and we can send 2 people to South Jersey right away, and we can get the truck out the door an hour earlier than when we would have in the past. And then here's a good comparison of the 6-inch fish versus the 12-inch fish. And like Craig was saying, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize, if you had a choice to stock one of those 2 fish, which fish would you stock?
One thing too is the you can see what people always told me over the years is it was a body fat weight of a small 6-inch fish to make it through the winter. And you can see in my hand there that the body weight of that fish in comparison to a yearling was night and day. So I think we've come a long way with that, knowing that the 12, 14-inch fish is going to survive the winter.
Our annual stocking goals: 14,000 6-inch fingerlings and 12,000 yearlings.
The 6-inch fingerlings are targeted at larger lakes and reservoirs, Spruce Run, Lake Apacong, Manasquan, places that potentially, which we know Spruce Run only gets 6-inch fish, and it's a really good channel cat fishing water body. So we believe that those larger water bodies between the herring populations and the blooms, summertime blooms, because the water gets warm, that they're getting these 6-inch fish enough body weight to get through the year. Plus, we've done better at growing them in this big building. So they're not, we grow them 7 inches and we're stocking them in like July, August instead of, or maybe September instead of November 1st. So we think that's making a big deal.
And one of the real special occasions that happens around here every 4 or 5 years, those fruit stock catfish that we collect those eggs from just tend to get a little too old and, like I said, less productive. So we have to swap them out. So this past fall was actually one of those years. We call them super cats here. They're not 6 inches. They're not 12 inches. They're anywhere from 12 to 15 pounds. And the thing is, the pond's been up for 4 or 5 years. So we really never know when we're draining the pond exactly how many fish we're going to get. So, anywhere from 200 to 300 fish. Typically, this year, I think it was just over 300. It was like 308. But we did that last fall. So we collected all the eggs this year early in the summer. And then once we stocked all the yearling fish, we actually drained the broodstock pond and drained that. And we stocked all of those super cats, for the public to enjoy. And so those catfish can live out the rest of their lives outside. And hopefully somebody can get a real fun catch.
And like it says here, our end game is angler success. And you can see by the photos there that the people actually hooked into some super cats. I know that the young angler up on the right-hand corner, he learned the hard way. He put his fishing rod down on the dock, and there was 3 or 4 guys there fishing, and they were gabbing. And next thing you know, they hear a loud splash and saw his fishing rod bouncing across Mountain Farm Pond like a rocket. He lost his rod. So, so the program's come a ton. Dating back to when I first started, we weren't dissolving the matrices. We used a paddle wheel, and we put the eggs in a basket as a clump, and the paddle wheel would rotate, and that would simulate what Tyler was saying about the channel cat's tail in the barrel fanning over it. But our success rates they varied greatly and mostly on the poor end. We learned 15 years ago from other states talking that dissolving the matrix, and all of a sudden we dissolved matrix and our hatching percents went up to like 80, 90%. So, and the popularity of the catfish program, you can see, by, recent articles on the cats from a couple articles in Fisherman Magazine from Tom P. Pagliarulli. Captain Dave Vollenweider's got a big article coming out, and Mel Jellison, which I hope he's listening in. We use him once in a while. He's a big catfish guy, and once in a while we've got a few handful of water bodies that we don't know a lot about. Catfish tend to be very difficult to sample as a fisheries biologist because they typically are down deep, and our shocking boats typically don't go to the depths that they hang. So I'll call him up and be like, hey, can you go check out Speedwell Lake in Morristown to give us some info? And that's kind of a cool thing. And on the popularity end, Tyler mentioned that we call it New Jersey noodling. And I was on social media earlier, and there was a girl, Hannah Barron, which I imagine a lot. She's a Alabama girl that's got a really funny voice, and she's got 1.6 million followers, and she's known for noodling flatheads and blues and all that stuff. So we hope the popularity is growing. We definitely see it. You see a lot more on all the fishing websites of these catfish being caught. So hopefully you guys have a chance. Doesn't have to be this summer. You can get out there and do it at any time of year. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. So at this point, if any of the anglers on the call here, if any of you have any questions for Craig or Tyler, regards, to the channel catfish program, now's your chance. So if you have a question, raise your virtual hand, and then when you're called on, please unmute yourself.
All right, the first hand I see raised is Douglas Roush. Douglas, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, sir.
So you mentioned Spruce Run and Manasquan Reservoir there, and of course they had some extreme low water conditions. What kind of impact do you think that had on your stocks that are in those reservoirs already from this summer and fall?
It's probably a biologist question, a regional folk, but it definitely concentrates the bait. So and as far as survivability, I don't think it impacted survivability at all, other than they probably grew better because the bait was concentrated. But maybe Chris or Eric might know a little bit better about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's Chris. I can speak for both of them. I agree with what Craig said, that it probably increased a little bit of predation at the time that they were stocked in the fall, probably increased some growth rates a little bit. But as far as survivability, those lakes have enough carrying capacity and enough water in them that even with the significant lowering like we've had, recently, I don't expect that there's very little impact.
All right, thank you, Douglas. Next hand I see up is Michael Chapman. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, the only question I have is there a stocking schedule that's posted for the catfish anywhere on the website or anywhere you can get that?
It's not like trout where we stock ahead. We announce it ahead. But if you look at any of the last 20, 10 years of stocking on there, if you look at the last couple of years, we don't typically alternate water bodies. Like whatever we stocked last year is probably going to get the same, that same amount of fish this year.
Okay. All right. So there is,
Yeah.
I just found 2021. It's the last one I found. So
yeah, if you look on the main list, I mentioned this, a couple of days ago to our INE staff. There's a main stocking list for every single year. If not in the channel cat section, in the general Hackettstown Hatchery section, that'll have every fish that we stock from this facility. All 14 species or 15. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And
Thanks,
enjoyed the presentation, by the way.
Thanks, Michael. I see one more hand raised. Lawrence, go ahead and ask away.
Good evening, everyone. I really want to thank you for this educational program you put out. I'm new to New Jersey and I've never fished catfish, so I have to go on your expertise to help me. What type of bait would I use for catfish?
Well, if you check those articles out in Fisherman Magazine. I mean, it's typically a chicken liver. It can be a worm under a bobber. There's a cut bait, like if you had a sucker, or a bluegill that was caught in that water body, chop it up. Guys were saying they use frozen trout heads. It's the true channel cat fishermen have secret baits. They got to be funky smells and rotten cheese. Everything. Hot dogs. That's right. Cut hot dogs are like one of the top 3 probably.
I appreciate the insight, gentlemen. Thanks again. It's been great.
All right. Thanks again, guys. It was excellent information. The video was fantastic, and we're really proud of the work that you guys do up there. The next speaker is fisheries biologist Justin Rosema. He's going to talk about our Coolwater program. He's going to discuss, some sampling that was done for species such as walleye, northern pike, muskie, hybrid striped bass.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to make sure you guys can hear me loud and clear.
All set, Justin, and we can see your presentation.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you, Sean. So again, just wanted to thank you all so much for coming out tonight to have the opportunity to learn about what we've been doing this past year. So as Sean mentioned, my name is Justin Rosema. I'm an assistant fisheries biologist with our branch of research and management. And I'm in charge of more of the monitoring aspect, whereas Craig and Tyler do most of our fish rearing. As you can see here, I'm our Coolwater fisheries specialist biologist. So that means everything walleye, northern pike, muskie, and hybrid striped bass, that is under my is under my umbrella of expertise. And tonight with you, I'm going to be sharing a bunch of results from some of our cool water monitoring work that we've done over the past this past year. So again, what am I referring to when I say our cool water program? As I said before, it's our 4 main species. That's the muskies, northern pike, walleye, and hybrid striped bass. All these species are species that require cooler water temperatures and higher dissolved oxygen contents than your traditional warm water fish, such as bass or catfish, as you guys just learned about, but not as much to the point as trout. They're kind of in between the two species. Therefore, they're not quite cold water, but they're not quite warm water. So therefore, we put them underneath the umbrella of a cool water fish species. All these fish are raised and stocked by our staff over at Hackettstown Hatchery. In 2024 alone, they raised and stocked over 12,000 muskie, 20,000 northern pike, 202,000 walleye, and 42,000 hybrid striped bass that were stocked into state waters all across the state to grow into trophy-sized targets for anglers like you. These fish have little documented, if any, natural reproduction in the state of New Jersey, and therefore they require these annual stockings to be able to create fisheries that are targetable by our anglers. So how do we actually monitor these fisheries in these lakes? From 2014 to 2017, a strong focused effort to reevaluate a lot of our cool water stocked fisheries occurred from another one of our biologists. Out of this effort came a strong baseline data set that allows us to be able to continue to monitor these cool water fisheries and make comparisons to be able to better understand changes in these locations and fisheries over time. Starting in 2023, a monitoring schedule was created to increase the frequency of the monitoring of these lakes. Based on this schedule, an evaluation for each species stocked at every water body that they're stocked will occur once every 6 years. The typical year of monitoring for us starts right at the beginning of March or mid-March, probably this year, for a northern pike survey. Trap nets, which work similar to a giant minnow trap, are set when the water reaches approximately 40 degrees Fahrenheit and the pike begin to spawn. Each of these surveys on each water lasts about 5 days. Next, we'll conduct our walleye work, which typically takes place when these fish push shallow to spawn and when the water reaches temperatures around 44 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We typically conduct approximately 2 to 3 nighttime boat electrofishing surveys at each lake that we look to evaluate. Next, when the water reaches approximately 50 degrees and even above, we conduct our muskie sampling, going back to using trap nets. We conduct these muskie surveys typically at 2 water bodies every year to be able to keep up with our 6-year monitoring schedule. Each survey takes between 5 to 10 days in length, depending on the size of the water body. Obviously, larger waters, such as Lake Apacon, require more time to be able to get a large enough data set to work with. Once summer ends, we end up setting gill nets to sample for hybrid striped bass. And this occurs about once every 2 years at one of the lakes where they're stocked. We typically set the gill nets once the water reaches approximately 57 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit and it cools off enough that they begin to push a little bit shallower again. These surveys usually last about 3 days each. So where did we actually sample in 2024? In total, we spent a total of 15 days trap netting, 2 nights of boat electrofishing that occurred all across the spring of 2024. We spent 5 days trap netting on Pompton Lake for northern pike. We then spent 2 nights of boat electrofishing for walleye at Monksville Reservoir, and then jumped into Mountain Lake for 5 days of trap netting for muskie. And then we ended up right back at Monksville Reservoir at the very beginning of April for another 5 days of trap netting for muskie. No hybrid striped bass work occurred this year, as this was an off year for the waters, as we only need to sample 1 every 2 years to keep all of them on schedule with our monitoring schedule. Now, before I can actually discuss the results, I need to mention some of the metrics that we frequently use as fisheries biologists to assess the status of these places. These are also probably going to be relevant for Chris's talk, so pay attention so that way you can also understand a lot of what he probably will mention these again when he starts his presentation too. The first big metric that we use is called catch per unit effort. This is a way for us to track how abundant the species is. And it's simply a measurement of the number of fish species, the number of fish that we caught, either per overnight net set or hour spent electrofishing. So this is usually talked about in terms of fish per net or fish per hour of electrofishing. Second is what is called relative weight in the center there. It's usually delineated by there with WR. And I think it's indicated that on a couple tables that I'll be sharing with you shortly. This is a mathematical way to calculate how fat or skinny a fish is. Based on the length of the fish that we measure, we can actually estimate what it should weigh on average, and then compare it to what it actually weighs. The result, therefore, is it ends up becoming a percent, where if a fish weighs greater than 100%, it's fatter than expected. If it's less than 100%, the fish is lighter than expected. Typically, if a fish is less than 80% of its expected weight, it's considered to be problematic. Lastly, on the very far right side, we have what's called the proportional size distribution. And this calculates the percent of fish that we caught that were greater than a particular size. These sizes vary for each species and are loosely based on the species' maximum attainable size. There's various different size categories for each species, each of which is increases in size. So to start, quality size range is usually the smallest. Preferred is a step up from quality, and then the memorable, which is delineated by PSDM, is usually the largest size class that we'll be looking at. This PSD usually helps us understand the balances between small versus large fish, and a healthy fishery typically has a fair balance of both large and small fish. So the first results that I'm going to be discussing with you is our northern pike work on Pompton Lake. During its most previous recent assessment in 2016, it was determined that a moderately abundant population of northern pike was present. It was also determined that the forage base could handle an increase in stocking rate, and therefore the stocking rate in northern pike was increased from 10 per acre to 15 per acre in 2018. This survey was conducted as a follow-up to understand how the fishery responded to this change back in 2018. And our results here are in the table with the 2016 results going to be on the top there, and then all of our current results are going to be at the bottom underneath the 2024 heading. This will be the same for all of our results there, just to keep in mind. Northern pike catch per unit effort was slightly higher than in 2016. However, this was still possibly within our margin of error for catch rate. Our average catch per unit effort for northern pike in New Jersey is approximately 2.6 fish per net. So this catch rate still remains lower than average across the state. Relative weights for these fish were healthy, being close to almost 100%. Therefore, they were just about as healthy, or just about as fat as we were anticipating. Our PSD and our PSDP values continue to show a population that is comprised of larger individuals. And actually, with the PSDP value increasing from 38% to 77% in 2024, the proportion of larger fish has actually increased, with now 100% of the pike being captured in 2024 being over 21 inches and 77% being over 28 inches. Bluegill, which ended up being the most abundant species caught, had a noticeable drop in catch per unit effort from 192 to 83 fish per net. However, this was seen with a lot of our other warm water species, with no other changes to either size distribution or relative weight, which usually you would anticipate seeing a major change in all three metrics if there actually was a major shift in the population, which should suggest that this catch rate was actually more likely caused by differences in water temperature between the two surveys. 2016 survey was done in much warmer water temperatures, approximately 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, than in 2024 when we did our work in about 5 to 9 degrees Celsius, which likely affected fish movement, as these are warm water fish species that often don't move as much in this colder water. And therefore, because our trap nets sit and our passive capture method, we likely didn't catch as many. 83% of the bluegill that we caught were greater than 6 inches, which is a little bit less than, what the 94% that we captured in 2024. In general, PSD values that are greater than 60% are considered an unbalanced population. And therefore, it appears that the bluegill population continues to be stunted in growth, as only 6% were captured were greater than 8 inches in size. Despite this, the average relative weight remains within an acceptable limit of 89%. Therefore, that likely food isn't a limiting factor for them. Yellow perch, which are a major prey species for northern pike, saw a similar major drop in catch per unit effort to bluegill. But again, no other metrics in the population changed, as would be expected. So therefore, again, I tended to attribute this to the lower water temperatures. Relative weights for these remained identical, again, like I said, at 83%, and therefore size distribution remained almost identical as well, with 93% of the perch captured being greater than 8 inches, and 29% being greater than 10 inches. This is a picture here of 2 northern pike that we captured in Pompton. Both of these fish were in the approximate mid 30-inch range. The average size for all pike that we captured was about 30.5 inches. Overall, the increase in northern pike stocking didn't seem to appear to have any negative effects on the forage base, with also only a potential minor increase to the species abundance. It may be desirable to further increase the stocking rate in hopes that stocking additional pike will further push their catch rate towards the statewide average of 2.6 fish per net in our surveys. Now moving on to some results for Mountain Lake. Mountain Lake has been a popular fishing destination for muskie since it was first stocked in 1995. When it was last assessed back in 2016, an overabundant and stunted population of muskie was noted here. The forage base appeared to be in decline due to the overabundance of the species, and therefore a couple different management actions were taken. Mountain Lake was subsequently removed from our trophy muskie regulation set and put into the general regulation set statewide for all muskies, which lowered the minimum size limit to keep them from 44 inches to 40 inches. We also lowered the stocking rate at Mountain Lake from 2 fish per acre down to 1 fish per acre to attempt to reduce their abundance here. In addition, Muskies Inc. Chapter 22, in coordination with Fish and Wildlife and Liberty Township, built and installed a total of 25 porcupine-style fish habitat cribs that they then installed throughout the lake in an effort to increase habitat for prey fish species here. This survey in 2024 was conducted to monitor for changes in both the muskie population and the forage base present here. In total, over the course of the 5 days, we only captured a total of 3 muskie, which ended up calculating out to a catch per unit effort of 0.3 fish per net. Pennsylvania uses a CPUE of 0.25 fish per net to indicate a targetable muskie population. This ended up being a notable decrease from the catch per unit effort of 1 fish per net captured in 2016. Difficulty with net sets, however, in 2024 made it difficult to confirm if this CPUE is actually trustworthy, as we had some instances of nets not fishing quite as effectively as we wanted to, which could have affected our overall catch rates. All 3 muskie that we caught were less than 38 inches in size, with only 1 actually being bigger than 30 inches. Due to this pretty low sample size, we weren't able to calculate any PSD values accurately, but the small average size of these muskies suggests that they still have not grown quite big. They seem to appear that they could be potentially pretty abundant still. On a better note, yellow perch were captured after being absent in the 2016 survey. Only a few individuals were still captured, and all were pretty large in size and had poor relative weights, with their average relative weight being approximately 76%, which, if you'll remember, anything less than 80% is considered problematic, which suggests that their population hasn't improved much yet. The bluegill population, on the other hand, appears to have decreased in abundance from 68 catch per unit effort to 15 CPUE, as noted in the blue highlight there. But the population size structure appears to have improved greatly in its balance, with 30% of individuals captured now being over 6 inches versus the only 6% being greater than 6 inches noted in 2016. So even though the catch per unit effort has decreased, their size has increased dramatically. During some native fish seining work, it was also noted that bluegill young of the year were in higher abundance than was seen in another seining survey that was done in 2018, which further suggests that the bluegill population is continuing to make progress towards a balanced recovery. Overall, it's been determined that additional work is going to be needed to increase the sample size for muskie here at Mountain Lake. In the fall of 2018, there was an additional survey that took place in the form of a daytime boat electrofishing survey. It was successful in capturing multiple muskie. Therefore, a boat electrofishing survey is scheduled for Mountain Lake this fall to better understand the effects of the muskie stocking rate change, as well as muskie inks, crib installations, and what those impacts have been on the fishery. Now, lastly, we've had a lot to talk about with Monksville Reservoir here, with both the walleye and the muskie fisheries being sampled this past year. Monksville Reservoir, which was built in 1987, was immediately identified as a prime candidate for the introduction of walleye. Despite the well-known nickname of Skunksville, since the start of walleye stocking in 1989, the reservoir has produced a quality fishery for this species, as well as largemouth and smallmouth bass. Assessments for walleye have documented a moderately abundant to abundant population of walleye, with many fish being of very quality size. Boat electrofishing work that we did in early April of 2024 continued to show that this is a quality fishery. The catch rate for walleye was noted to have increased from 2016 to 2024, with 24 fish per hour being noted this past year. This is a similar catch rate to what was observed in a survey back in 2002, which ended up being 25 per hour. Any catch rate of walleye that's in the springtime that's greater than 20 fish per hour is typically considered high. The size structure of walleye hasn't changed much since the last survey in 2016, being again comprised of mostly large individuals, as 98% of the walleye captured were greater than 15 inches and 75% were greater than 20 inches. The average relative weight for this species has remained the same, almost exactly the same between sampling in 2016 and 2024 at approximately 88% of their expected weight. The graph on the left here is the number of walleye that we caught in various different size classes. Each column in this graph is approximately a 2-inch wide size group. And the peak of the graph in the center there is the size range between 20 to 22 inches in size. The total number of fish caught in 20 to 22 inches was approximately 35 fish, and then declined to either side. The steady rise and decline on either side of that peak indicates that the fishery is fairly balanced and in healthy condition. Overall, a lot of quality walleye were captured. Monksville Reservoir continues to provide a trophy fishery for New Jersey Ag. Now, moving on to the muskies. In addition to the boat electrofishing work, as I mentioned, we conducted a trap netting survey targeting the muskies specifically. A total of 5 muskie were caught over the course of our 5-day-long survey. And in addition, we captured another 3 pure strain and 2 tiger muskie while we were conducting our walleye assessment as well. The catch per unit effort for muskie has remained the same as it was in a survey conducted in 2015 at 0.3 fish per net. This again is above Pennsylvania's standard of 0.25 fish per net for a targetable muskie fishery. And the population again is comprised of mostly big individuals, with all of the fish that we caught in 2024 being greater than 30 inches in size, and 80% of the fish we caught being greater than 38 inches. The average relative weight for muskie dropped notably from 94% in 2015 to 81% in 2024. Now, this could possibly be explained by sampling we sampled a little bit closer to the spawn, as some fish captured were noted to be in post-spawn condition, where females would have dropped their eggs, and therefore below average relative weights could be expected. However, it could also be equally likely that food sources could be stressed. So therefore, if future monitoring continues to reveal relative weights below 80, management action may need to be taken in order to prove the health of the muskie population. Bluegill, which were again the most abundant species captured during this survey, and also likely an important prey species for muskies here, has improved in condition since a 2002 survey. While I don't have the numbers for this survey up on the table here, The catch per unit effort for bluegills between 2002 and 2024 was nearly identical, suggesting that their abundance hasn't fluctuated much in the past 20 years. The bluegill population appears to have improved slightly in size condition since 2002, as the PSD value increased from 16% of fish captured to be greater than 6 inches to 69% of fish being greater than 6 inches. However, it's still evident that a stunted population exists, as none of the bluegill in both surveys have been noted to be greater than 8 inches in size. Yellow perch, another important prey species for muskies, have had low catch rates in surveys dating back to 2003. Yellow perch were noted to be in poor condition with an average relative weight of 77%, again below that 80% problematic threshold. But unfortunately, it's unknown what the average relative weight of this species was in either of our previous surveys, as their catch rates were so low. So therefore, it's unknown if this condition has deteriorated recently, and this could possibly be an explanation for the drop in relative weight for muskie, or if this has just been a chronic issue that's been in the reservoir pretty consistently. Regardless, Monksville Reservoir continues to hold a lot of trophy-sized muskie. The fish on the left and right is actually the same fish. We actually captured this fish twice during our survey work, once during our walleye work and once doing our muskie work 2 weeks later. This fish measured in at an astounding 50.5 inches and weighed about 29 pounds. Well, by the time that we reached her the first time, she was already spawned out, so we can only imagine what she weighed before the spawn when she was full of eggs. The fish in the middle is another large muskie that we encountered during some fall electrofishing work targeting largemouth bass. And this fish measured in at 49.5 inches and weighed almost 33 pounds. As a result of all the work that we conducted this past spring on Monksville Reservoir, and based on a lot of angler interest that we've heard from the recent state records that have been caught in the past couple of years, we began to stock hybrid striped bass into Monksville Reservoir. A total of 675 fish, all about 15 inches in length and 1.5 pounds in size, were stocked into Monksville Reservoir this past October. Because these fish were not fingerlings, we expect a much higher survival rate for them, as well as a higher potential for their maximum size, which is very exciting. This is currently being considered as a trial stocking to further gauge angler interest, as well as understand any potential impacts that these fish might have to the existing fisheries in Monksville Reservoir. If angler interest remains high and minimal impacts to the existing fisheries are seen from this stocking, Monksville Reservoir may be added into the annual hybrid striped bass stocking program, along with our other lakes, Lake Apacong, Spruce Run Reservoir, and Manasquan Reservoir. If you happen to catch one of these fish, I'd be very interested in hearing about it. Please send any of your catch reports to my email that I got listed there. I'll also have it in the next slide for you. And if you have an accurate bump board and a scale, any lengths and weights on these fish could be useful in tracking their growth and health over time. So with that concludes all the results from our spring Coolwater sampling work. We're now currently only a few weeks away from the start of our 2025 Coolwater sampling season. And these are the current waters that are scheduled to be sampled over the course of this spring and fall. First, Bud Lake is going to be sampled pretty soon after ice out for northern pike, likely sometime in mid to late March. Furnace Lake will be sampled for muskie, likely around early to mid-April, depending on the water temperatures. Lake Apacong will have all 3 of its cool water fisheries assessed. Sampling will likely be taking place sometime in late March to early April for walleye, sometime in April for muskie, and either September or October for hybrid striped bass. If you're interested in the results from these coming surveys, please tune into next year's forum to learn more about them. And then lastly, if you guys have any questions that you don't get to ask me at this point in time, including those of you that may be watching a recording later on YouTube, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at the email address displayed in the bottom left of the screen. Thank you guys so much.
Great work there, Justin. Okay, we do have time for a couple questions. So if you have any questions relative to Justin's presentation, please raise your virtual hand. All yours, Eric.
Okay. Gary E. Go ahead, Gary.
Hello. Quick question. When was the first time that Monksville received hybrid striped bass?
I believe that stocking occurred in either 2016 or 2017.
And
Sorry.
I'm sorry. And also, Did I see something where someone caught a trophy hybrid already out of there?
Yeah, we actually had two different state records get caught. I believe it was 2020 and 2021. We had two state records come almost back to back over the course of a couple months from a relatively small stocking event that happened from surplus fish, similar to what we just did this past fall.
All right, thank you, Gary. Next, we'll go to Michael M. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, my question is, I'm from South Jersey, and I was wondering, is there any plans to stock anything in South Jersey, or is it not possible?
A lot of our waters down in South Jersey we've experimented with in the past, back in the 1980s to 1990s. We had some fairly unsuccessful introductions of species such as hybrid striped bass and northern pike in a couple of different places. So it's been attempted before unsuccessfully, but there is a little bit more talk for at least one different South Jersey water body for one of the Coolwater species. I don't want to get too much into details. I don't want to promise anything. But we are looking into potentially adding another species a little bit further south than their current distribution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. One more person, we'll call on Robert B. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, and thanks, Justin, for an excellent presentation. So it sounds like your net sets went well for muskie, went well in Monksville, but not so good in Mountain Lake. What were some of the reasons why they didn't go so well in Mountain Lake?
So Mountain Lake is one of the more natural lakes in the state. So therefore, it's got a lot of really steep sides to it, with some really steep drop-offs. So the trap nets are only effective in about 8 feet of water or less. And if we set them in any deeper water, the fish are able to swim over the net instead of swimming into it. And with the steeper drop-offs in Mountain Lake, we had a lot of difficulty in getting the nets to properly sit in the proper depths to be able to effectively fish. We would check some nets on certain days, and we'd be able to see on the fish finder that they were sitting in, maybe 9 to 12 feet of water potentially. When we would come to check them the next day, and we would find that there were next to no fish in them, which would suggest that the net set wasn't as effective. And with our limited amount of time, unfortunately, we weren't able to extend the sampling there this spring to be able to add onto that sample size.
Well, great. Thank you so much for that. And I did hear you say, I think that you're planning to come back in the fall to do some electrofishing. I didn't see that on your 2025 slide, but do I understand that correctly?
Oh, yes. Yes, that is correct. Yep, that wasn't something that I mentioned quite here, but yeah, you'd be correct that I intend to come back and do some electrofishing work there in the fall.
Great. Thank you very much.
Of course, you're welcome.
All right, well, thank you very much, Justin. Once again, an excellent presentation. You continue to set a high standard. I'm going to introduce our last speaker of the evening. That's Chris Smith. Chris has been our long-term black bass fisheries biologist. He's been a jack of all trades. He's led our aquatic invasive work in recent years. Until recently, Chris was promoted into our supervising biologist position. He's now in charge of our entire research and management unit.
So I just want to actually start out by saying great job, Justin, and also to Craig and Tyler for some great presentations tonight. And like Sean said, Justin definitely set, and all staff have set a high bar to finish up with. But definitely, everybody, it's a pleasure to be able to speak to everybody tonight that joined our meeting. I always enjoy, coming and speaking to the group about our black bass work, and in recent years talking about invasive species, which we've done a lot more of since 2008 with the introduction of the snakehead into the state and spreading rapidly throughout the state. So it definitely gives us a lot of work to continue to work on. Bear with me, I have a ongoing cough that if I start gagging, I apologize. So in 2024, our outfit definitely suffered a little bit of some technical difficulties and setbacks with our electrofishing boat that was out of commission for some time. But even with those difficulties, our staff was able to get out to a lot of different water bodies throughout the state. And not only electrofishing, but also doing some seining surveys. You can see some numbers that we have up here. We went to 24 water bodies throughout the state this year, conducted 16 electrofishing surveys, 12 seining surveys. So not only are we looking at, our general warm water fish like our bass and our sunfish, but in many instances, like I've already said, we're also looking at our invasive species, such as the northern snakehead, and then in recent years, the flathead catfish, and now the blue catfish is starting to pop up in the Delaware River. So as Justin mentioned, some of the indices that we use to kind of compare water body to water body, looking at distribution, condition, and abundance, are our PSD. In terms of largemouth bass, our PSD, our PSDP, our PSDM, the size ranges that we're using to look at the distribution of the population are the 12 inches, 15 inches, and 20 inches. So we can see that a PSD between 40 and 70 for a 12-inch fish, that's where we would expect that 40 to 70% of the population is going to be about, somewhere around 12 inches or above 12 inches. Again, the PSDP, between 10 to 40% of our population should be over 15% for, 15 inches. And our PSDM, between 0 and 10% of the population is generally over 20 inches. Again, index of condition, our relative weight, and we'll see a lot that I make reference to in our slides for each one of the individual water bodies is our CPUE. This is a good indicator, our catch rate, and comparing not just lake to lake, but within a lake, year to year is a good indicator of how the population's doing, and overall abundance. Definitely, as Justin mentioned, one of the things to consider, when we see that variability quite a bit in CPUE, and that has a lot to do with lake depth, turbidity, temperature, and available cover. We talk about the catchability of a bass population. Lakes that are generally a lot shallower, have abundant vegetation or shoreline cover. Generally, those catch rates seem to be a little bit higher, where there's a lot more cover that kind of hold the fish and concentrate them. So we end up with catch rates that are a little bit higher in those cases. So when we get into the specifics, Assunpink Lake is, in the central part of the state, Monmouth County. It's one of our wildlife management area lakes, and it's also one of our lakes that we manage as part of the Lunker Bass program. What I mean by that is we normally have a 12-inch size limit and a 5-fish daily creel limit on bass species in the state. With our Lunker Bass lakes, we have a 15-inch size limit and a reduced creel limit of 3 fish. We've been monitoring this population, at Assunpink pretty regularly now. You can see this graph on the left-hand side goes from 2017 to 2024. We had some pretty steady decline in the population abundance as, in relation to the CPUE, our catch rate, over the last 7 years. We actually did see a little bit of an increase this past year, and things are starting to look on the bright side. You can see down at the bottom in the graph or the table, from the last 3 years, 2022, 2023, 2024, you can see the CPUE has increased every single year for the last 3 years, and as well as the PSD and PSDP have also increased over the last 3 years. So it's good. Things are looking good for the lake. As a note, we've been closely monitoring this population and the water body due to the abundance and presence of an invasive plant species called hydrilla. Our staff with land management has been successfully treating, through a consultant, treating the lake for invasive hydrilla over the last couple of years. And whereas probably about estimated 75% of the lake surface area was covered by hydrilla just 3 years ago, we've reduced it down to almost 0 of the lake. I don't believe that there was any hydrilla observed in this past season. Now, we usually, managing aquatic plants, and especially aquatic plants, is a very touchy subject, throughout the state. Aquatic vegetation has an absolute beneficial, impact on especially centrarchids like sunfish, largemouth bass, and even other species like yellow perch. So it's really a fine line of where, wanting to have available cover that's beneficial to the lake, but also, being the lake having a usability for our constituency. And that's where the point where we were at with Assunpink, with over 75% coverage, the lake just was not usable anymore for boaters. So that's why we had to reduce that population, on top of being invasive species. So another lake in the same kind of thing that we're dealing with there, unfortunately, it's not our water body, is Manasquan Reservoir. It's a 720 acre reservoir that's maintained and owned by the Water Supply Authority. It is part of Monmouth County Park System, and it also has invasive hydrilla. Now, this is also used as a water supply, so there's some other considerations. Being a multi-use facility, it's not just for recreation, so there's definitely some other factors and importance in managing that hydrilla population. So they've been actively treating with herbicides and trying to treat that population too, and reducing the hydrilla within Manasquan Reservoir. However, we did 2 electrofishing surveys over the last 2 years, 2023, 2024. We had a pretty successful survey in the spring of 23, where we sampled for a little over 2 hours, caught 95 bass for smallmouth. This survey was done at night. We had a CPUE of 44 bass per hour. We can see the 58% of the 58% of the population was over 12 inches, which is a good number. 38% was over 15 inches, which is, again, that would indicate a balanced population. The largest bass collected at that time was just under 6.5 pounds. Fast forwarding to October of 2024, we had about an hour-long survey during the day. Caught 72 largemouth bass, 3 smallmouth. We had a little bit higher, significantly higher CPUE at 66 bass per hour. We had a PSD of 82% of the population was greater than 12 inches, and 48% were over 15 inches. So both indices were higher than the previous, actually all the indices were higher than the previous year. Largest bass collected was just under 6 pounds. We did observed a few other extremely large fish, in the 6 pound range that did elude capture during that survey. As you can see in the picture on the left, the reservoir was pretty low at the time, and it had some fish pulled off if anybody's familiar with Manasquan, there's a lot of standing timber. Again, quite a bit of aquatic vegetation, but that time of year, hydrilla is temperature sensitive. It usually starts to die off pretty early in the fall, and it had died off pretty significantly, so that really wasn't a factor. But the fish were, shallow as they typically go in the fall and in October, and it, led for a very good catch rate, especially considering a daytime survey, which typically, as the literature says, usually the catch rates are lower during the day. However, we have some really good, especially for the central and southern part of the state, we have some really good catch rates during the day, in that part of the state. So moving on to another one of our real popular water bodies is Lake Audrey. This is, we could talk for, quite some time about Lake Audrey, but the quick version of it is, this is a 125 acre sand pond down in Cumberland County. We've been actively managing the lake for close to about 21 years now. We did a liming project at the lake where we put close to about 100 tons of lime into the lake, raising the pH up to be conducive to supporting fish population. At the start of the project, early 2000s, the lake was completely void of fish. It was a typical South Jersey blue hole, very low productivity. So we've increased productivity, increased the pH, and we started it out with smallmouth for about 10 years. Had some very good success until the population was impacted by significantly dropping pH levels. At the time, some anglers had introduced largemouth bass also. So the largemouth bass eventually, with that pH shift, largemouth bass outcompeted the smallmouth. And eventually we ended up shifting our management focus to largemouth bass instead. So we did a survey there this past fall. We found 54 largemouth bass in, an hour, about an hour and a half of surveying time in October. Relatively good catch rate for that water body. And the fish were in pretty good condition. However, we saw that the population, which is indicative of what anglers catch during all of our tournament results that we receive, is most fish are pretty small, less than 15 inches. 82% of the population was over 12 inches, but only 9% of the population was over 15 inches. The one positive we saw was bluegill were in very high abundance, both young of the year and intermediate. These intermediate fish we would consider to be about 2 to 4 inches. So we had multiple year classes of bluegill. Very good to see. Great forage is available. We did do some supplemental stocking over the last couple of years with golden shiner to kind of supplement the forage in the pond. But we had a good bloom of some pondweed back a few years ago, about 5 years ago, and that really jump-started that largemouth bass population. And angler reports have started to indicate that the population's kind of going down a little bit. So we stocked it with some supplemental largemouth bass in 2024 to kind of give it a little extra shot, knowing that it's just kind of preemptive to an anticipation that with vegetation is usually seasonally fluctuates from year to year. We're hoping that it comes back in the next couple of years and we'll really see a boom in the bass population. Definitely over the next couple of years, we're anticipating. We have been discussing a little bit internally about possibly reintroducing smallmouth bass into the lake, taking another crack at it and see if we can, maybe not being as successful as we were in the past due to that there's also largemouth in there, but it would be a nice little token stocking that we could do for South Jersey and add another water body to the southern part of the state with a different species like smallmouth bass, because it was so well received back over the last 10 to 15 years ago. Moving forward, we have one of our places, we'll talk a little bit about invasive species a little bit. So we have the Salem Canal, Salem County. We started really heavily sampling this about 25, 26 years ago. We did an inventory in 1999. And since that time, you can see the years that we've sampled it pretty regularly since that time. With some consistent sampling, and definitely since 2007, 2008, when we started finding snakeheads in the state. This is one of the areas that they got into through a floodgate that goes directly to the Delaware River. You can see in the picture on the right-hand side the type of vegetation that we have, within the canal. You can see some matted filamentous algae mixed with some duckweed, some coontail, a little bit of milfoil. And kind of merging up with some more emergent vegetation with some Phragmites and cattail. The snakehead really like to be as shallow as they possibly can. Kind of that transition period, like almost right on the bank in about 2 inches of water is where the snakeheads like to be. So it becomes a very popular fish for anglers to fish for these days. Kayak anglers fishing with topwater frogs are extremely successful, and the Salem Canal is definitely one of the places to go if you're interested in catching snakeheads. So we look at the population, as it has been potentially impacting our largemouth bass population or other native species or other, our native species. Our bass are introduced non-natives, but as it impacts our other recreationally important species. You can see in the last 3 years, kind of a comparison of the last 3 surveys that we did, and our results are pretty consistent. We do, as far as bass population, the CPUE going from 16 to 22 to 19 bass per hour. It's a pretty consistent, stock or catch rate, and that's what we would, we hope to continue to see. Unfortunately, we do continue to see an increase in the number of snakeheads. And this shoreline that we happen to be going down electrofishing at the time, this is one of the really, really good shorelines for catching snakeheads off of. As an avid angler and an avid bass angler myself, I can tell you firsthand that this shoreline used to be an excellent bank to catch largemouth bass on. Not so much anymore. So we do see that the snakeheads have, displaced, the bass in certain areas. So when we do get asked, what are the impacts of invasive species on our recreationally game, important game species, that's one of the observations that we've made, is that they are displacing those other species. So getting into, as we had our last public meeting back a couple weeks ago, and Chief Kraus presented on some of our changes that we have coming up, and we just wanted to make mention for any of those folks that weren't able to join us at the last meeting. We have a rule change, regulation change for our lunker bass program, which we intend to add 2 more water bodies, Merrill Creek Reservoir and Round Valley Reservoir, to the lunker bass program. As I already mentioned, these will carry special regulations for size limit and daily creel limit. And why? To maintain the quality fisheries that exist. So a little more about those 2 water bodies. So we have Round Valley Reservoir. This picture, fortunately, this is a recycled photo that we from 2016 when we did our lake inventory. However, one of our other biologists did some work this past year, and you can see the graph looking at the trend line. Again, you see a little decline in the population as far as in regards to the CPUA. However, we see a little bump this past year, is going back up compared to 2023. Again, we're going to add this to the lunker bass program. Did 2 nights of electrofishing this past year, about 3.5 hours of total sampling time at night, collected 71 largemouth bass. I apologize for the typo that's on there that I didn't notice, that it says Smith, but it's supposed to be smallmouth bass. Has 44 smallmouth bass were collected with it for a total of 115 bass. We had a catch rate of 31 bass per hour. And the largest bass collected, this past year was a largemouth measuring 21.2 inches and weighing 6.4 pounds. And we had a nice sized smallmouth at 20 inches and 3.7 pounds. As Justin indicated, the timing is everything with our sample, and being that we sampled in middle of May, this fish could have, smallmouth spawned pretty early in May. This fish could have already spawned, because that's a pretty long smallmouth. So the indication is definitely these are, that might have been a post-spawn fish. So things are looking good for Round Valley, and the nice thing is that the dam work, the long-term dam project has been completed, and the water level is going back up on the reservoir. And while it was down for so long, the amount of terrestrial vegetation, woody debris, woody trees and stuff that grew up, it's great cover. Biologist Scott Collenberg has been actively working with RVTA to do some additional habitat, placing brush piles in the lake and different areas aside from the shoreline, in order to continue to maintain that habitat, which is really going to be essential to maintain those bass populations in the near future. So moving on to another water body that we're excited about adding to the lunker bass program is Merrill Creek Reservoir, which we did surveys in 2023 and 2024. We were a little, I'll go so far as say alarmed in 2023 at the low CPUE that we had during our survey. And we think that we might have been just a little bit off in our timing of when we went. The reservoir was typically sampled by a private consultant agency prior to Fish and Wildlife kind of taking over the sampling, 4 or 5 years ago. And that, and Pat Hamilton our former biologist worked in conjunction with the consultant, and they always did their work and their sampling in the middle of May. We tried to go a little bit earlier, trying to get some better condition out of the fish, because most of the time those fish were post-spawn and relative weights were pretty low. So we tried going a little bit earlier, and we just were too early, last year. We definitely hit it right on the head this year. We had 97 largemouth bass and 101 smallmouth. And we missed many other fish that, as Justin also mentioned, and Craig mentioned too, about electrofishing, and sometimes they're just a little bit too deep and the net's just not, the handle's not quite long enough. So we missed quite a few fish, and so our catch rate could have been even higher. But things look excellent for Merrill Creek. We're really excited about adding that one to the to the program. And if you want to catch a nice sized smallmouth bass, up in that, that's definitely one of the places to go. We were really excited about how many really quality, nice sized smallmouth bass are in Merrill Creek. So, again, this is another slide that comes from our fish code meeting back a couple weeks ago, and just a little kind of a cleanup of some of our regulations. Is we're going to remove our conservation regulations, our bass and panfish regulations from two water bodies, Riker Lake up north and Rainbow Lake down south. We highlighted this last year during our presentation and the reasons for it. And it's just not, they're kind of, the lakes just aren't, producing, based on those regulations, and they're not creating any additional, beneficial impact by having those, regulations. So we're bringing it back to just the general regulations for both bass and panfish for both water bodies, and we don't expect there's going to be any negative impact at all. Moving on, we have a couple more water bodies to highlight. Part of Justin's work that he was doing for his Coolwater work, he also did some bass work at Pompton Lake. Again, it's 147 acre impoundment of the Ramapo. 2 nights of electrofishing in October. Had some really good catch rates with 157 largemouth bass, of which 47 of them were stock size. When we say stock size for bass, that's a 8-inch fish, 200 millimeters. So we had a lot of fish that were really small. That we had. A lot of them were in between the 200 and 275 millimeter range, so just over 8 inches. 45 bass were even less than 8 inches, so a lot of little guys and a lot of good potential for recruitment and potential for the future. So we had a PSD. Again, this 12-inch fish, 54%, 33% over 15 inches. So even though we had a lot of little fish, we still had a really good number of larger fish too. Biggest fish caught was 20 inches, weighed 5.5 pounds, and things look pretty good for Pompton Lake. So I think one of the recommendations is to continue to monitor it. In a couple of years, we'll go back and look at it again and see what impact and see what change we had for those little, those smaller fish, and see if they're, contributing to the population and growing or kind of staying small, or if it was just an anomaly of a good year class of spawn. Again, part of Justin's work with Monksville. It was last surveyed in 2015. We got out there in October this year, the 9th and the 10th, did almost 4 hours of a night of electrofishing, caught 138 total bass, 118 largemouth, 20 smallmouth, had a catch rate of 30 stock size bass per hour, which is kind of indicative. It's pretty good catch rate. We had our PSD increased. So that was good to see, from 48 to 64%. Bass appeared to be in good condition. And generally, the smallmouth just weren't really well represented during the sample. But as Justin mentioned, it was also recently stocked with hybrid striped bass. So this is definitely a lake that we're going to continue to monitor and we're actively managing. Definitely look for some more results in the future with some more work there. Moving back down to South Jersey, we have Sunset Lake down in Cumberland County. This is for the South Jersey residents, this has definitely been one of the small, popular bass ponds, over the years. And the dam failed in around 2012. I think it was the year of Sandy. And since then, we've been working to try to reestablish the bass population. There's been some increased sedimentation in the lake due to the dam failures upstream during that storm. Habitat significantly increased while the lake was down. Which really kind of helped to bolster the population, providing some good habitat. And the hatchery's done a great job of growing and stocking largemouth bass in the lake a number of years to help really jumpstart that population. And so we did a survey in April of this past year and collected 54 bass with a 43 bass per hour catch rate, which wasn't bad. We'd like to see a little bit higher, biggest bass we found was just under 20 inches and just under 5 pounds. Can continue to monitor the population, especially considering that unfortunately this is another water body that the snakeheads have found their way into. There is a fish ladder that's on the lake that's intended for anadromous migratory fish, but the snakeheads use the fish ladder too, like they do in many cases. And we did find 3 adult snakeheads. Anglers started catching them in 2023, reported it to us, and we did collect 3 adults this past year. So we'll continue to monitor that population. Carp continue to be, the carp population exploded when the lake was filled back up in 2024, or yeah, I think it was about 2014, I believe it was, after the dam was repaired. Since then, the carp population has just exploded, and we've removed some, but we want to get a project going again to try to, reduce that carp population to really help, allow that bass population to come back. So getting back into the invasives, as Kristen said, AD Maestrella said earlier, that we've completed and we have an approved aquatic invasive species management plan. We recently were able to bring over Samantha McQueston from Marine Fisheries as a transfer to serve as our new AIS coordinator to implement the management plan, which we're super excited about. And we're already starting to make a lot of headway on moving forward. There are 15 critical top priorities that were identified in the plan. You can see some of those there, like having a database manager, having a coordinator position, getting a statewide reporting platform that we hope to have. We're working on now, and we hope to have that active, here in the near future. We're definitely looking at funding sources for continuing to manage AIS populations. We're reaching out to neighboring states and how we can partner with our neighbors on the best management of our invasives, working with our other, creating working groups, with our partners. And definitely, as I mentioned before, that reporting platform is the key, that we're working on right now. So we're really excited as far as invasive species management, and we hope to be able to have, specific invasives talk here in the probably next year. Our last water body, always a popular one, and it's one that holds dear to my heart. It's one of my places that I learned to freshwater fish in the state, and I've spent a lot of time sampling and fishing myself. This Union Lake in Millville. It's our largest lake in South Jersey. It's an impoundment of the Marsh River. We sampled it twice in 2024, both in April, about a week apart. We had a catch rate of 21 bass per hour first time, and 28 bass per hour the second time around. See pretty even distribution on our PSD and PSDP for both surveys, which is good to see. We don't want to see huge variation. Things look pretty good. You can see some nice quality size, pictures of some fish. Those were all from those 2 surveys. So things look good. We continue to stock, a lot of bass in the lake, and you can see that, Craig and the guys have stocked over 100,000 young of the year bass over the last 5 years in Union Lake. So that's one that's really, it gets a lot of fishing pressure, a lot of tournament pressure. So we really try to, put a lot of emphasis on this water body to keep things, top notch, for the anglers. The one concerning bit of information is that the snakeheads were also confirmed in the Marsh River this past year. We collected them in Manasquan Sand Pond. We had a positive occurrence, so we have continued to monitor Union. We've received a couple reports that there was a snakehead caught in there with no positive confirmation yet. So that's on our list for early in the season, right? Ice is going out in South Jersey, right now. So we'll be out there soon to start to look to do our bass work, and coming mid-March. And that'll be one of the places we'll be going to. So not all, we mentioned a lot of, larger water bodies. There's a lot of great opportunities out there too in small ponds, and that's one of our, focus that we've had over the last couple of years of trying to get a couple of community lakes based programs kind of up and running. And, the hatchery again has been doing some great job, of raising some large catchable size fish, large catchable bass, some hybrid striped bass, large catfish, and some of that information with those extra bonus stockings that we've done over the last couple of years, are available on our website. We're working on some additional programs and stocking for this upcoming year. And we're targeting a lot of these smaller water bodies. Again, locations that are excellent, parts of our trout stocking program. They're also great, water bodies for our channel catfish stocking program, and even for bass. Waters like this are right in your back door, or out your back door in your backyard. So, definitely don't discount, the small water bodies. You can see a list of places that we went seining this year. I'm not going to read through the entire list, but generally you can see on here that most of the water bodies are less than 5 acres. So, and we have, great bass populations in some of those water bodies. So, with that, I definitely thank everybody for the time. And I guess we'll take any questions.
All right, I see one hand raised. Barry F., go ahead and unmute and ask your question, Barry.
Hey, Chris, first off, thank you, and thank you for everybody who's put the hard work in this presentation. It's been great. It's our first time. I don't know if this is a regular occurrence, but I want to thank everybody for the hard work, obviously. Chris, I got to tell you, thank God for you, because as a South Jersey angler, up until you got in here, I was feeling pretty left out. We appreciate all the hard work. We recognize in South Jersey we cannot sustain some of the fisheries that they're trying to do up in North Jersey. But can you please give me a lifeline and tell me that you guys are working on enhancing some other water bodies here in South Jersey? You mentioned Manasquan Ponds, which is, was shut down for a period of time, back up and running now, was a great hatchery for us to fish in. Is there any plans to do some work there, or even Hackettstown Lake, to try to enhance our bass populations? Because that's all we have here in South Jersey. Let's face facts.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, I mean, I got my upbringing as primarily as a bass fisherman. And I mean, that's been a lot of the focus of much of my work that I've done over the last, 25 years has been with managing bass populations. And, I think that we really had a nice, shift. And, Craig and the guys have been, very receptive over the years of kind of adjusting, production and, increasing our numbers of bass that we stock. It wasn't that long ago that, we may only produce, and stock, say 10,000 young of the year bass statewide. And now, some years we're producing 150, 200,000, young of the year bass that we're stocking throughout the state. So, definitely, hats off to those folks for working with the biologists to adjust things and meet our needs and requests. I mean, it's definitely, we couldn't do it without them. So, we continue to look at, as we do our regular sampling and, as we get requests and reports from anglers like yourself about, we can't be everywhere, we're a small outfit. We can't be everywhere every year. So as we get emails and requests and phone calls saying, hey, can you come and check out this particular location? Then we get it on the sampling list for the following year and go out and check it out and see what the population looks like. And if we think that, we can do anything as far as, if stocking is going to improve it, then we're going to do some stocking. And if it needs some habitat manipulation or working with the town or the owners to improve access, then that's what we're going to do. But definitely, like I said, we definitely, rely on feedback, in platforms like this and phone calls and emails from our constituents that kind of, point us in the direction sometimes.
Thanks, Chris. One follow-up, if you don't mind. So yep. You spoke a lot about the snakehead invasion, particularly in South Jersey. What is the current recommendations? Are we catch and releasing, or are we eradicating?
No, we're eradicating that stance has stayed the same since day one. I know that there's a lot of conflicting information that have been circulating among the angling community, but no, it's catch, do not release, and destroy. And live transport, live possession and transport is illegal.
All right, thank you, Barry. We'll move down the list. We'll go to Alex G. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, earlier you had said, back to the muskies, that there was little to no natural reproduction, but yet later on you showed a big fish that was spawned out. I mean, that seems kind of a contradiction. You have no confidence that it would have spawned and actually produced live young that survived.
Yeah, so the muskies have your cool water species have pretty specific habitat requirements, and I mean even in more of their traditional waters, up north, even in Michigan, Wisconsin, they're even seeing unsuccessful reproduction in some of those water bodies where they would more typically be found. So yeah, they go through the motions here. They'll make migrations, they'll push upstream, they'll go to where you would expect to find them doing the spawning deal. They just do not successfully spawn.
Yeah, but aren't they already successful in the Delaware River?
No, we don't have. I mean, there's been some indication over the years with some debate that there may be limited recruitment potential, but I don't believe that we've ever successfully documented natural recruitment or reproduction.
Even in the Delaware?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Alex. We'll continue on. Luke L., go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yep. Luke, go ahead.
Hi, Chris. Great presentation. I have like two questions. I'll just start off with some smallmouth bass. Really appreciate the smallmouth bass fisheries around New Jersey, especially on the rivers. I was just curious about the management, any concerns about the smallmouth bass fishery in the Delaware River, how it compares to the Raritan River and other kind of tributaries across the state.
So it's a great question, and it's unfortunate that it's an area that we've definitely lacked, sampling effort in recent years. I know that Pennsylvania has been doing some work on a lot more than we have on the upper part of the Delaware. We've been talking about it, more recently about, more actively either partnering with our neighboring states or doing more work ourselves, especially on the Delaware. To get a little bit better handle. But I mean, in general, we get, good angling reports. It's not, a place that we would actively start. We just don't have the capacity to be able to, we'll say, enhance the population of smallmouth bass through stocking. We have limited, very limited availability of fish that we're able to stock for, to bolster smallmouth populations. So it's not something that we'd be able to really kind of, we'll say, successfully increase. But definitely, I mean, I think that, in a lot of realms of Justin's work and looking at cool water species, I think there's a lot of potential there of looking at walleye populations, muskie populations, and the smallmouth bass population in the upper Delaware. So, we can talk in-house and, possibly get a project going to start to look at that and get you some more information.
Wonderful, thank you. Second question, I want to talk about the bowfin and maybe just, especially with the recent state record, I think it's state record.
Yep.
Just more spotlight on that. I'm just kind of curious what the bowfin is like across the state. I know it's kind of a decent fishery in the South Jersey, North Jersey, it's kind of just unknown. I'm curious if it's a fragile kind of fishery or what your takes on it. Could you have some? Yeah. go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, most of what we know of the bowfin population, I mean, at least what I know of it, most of it's related to South Jersey, Trenton South, all the tributaries, pretty much all. I found them in pretty much all the tributaries of the Delaware, in the tidal sections. Anywhere where you have an embayment, with vegetation, to species that likes to get shallow, it's just like a snakehead. Again, as I mentioned with bass, that's something that we see absolutely, like, competing for space and resource, with the boat between the bowfin and the snakehead. Places that there's a trib that comes into the Salem Canal, called Game Creek. That over time you can see a shift in our electrofishing surveys. You can see a shift in the population from, bowfin were not actually in the canal. I'd say 30 years ago. They kind of worked their way into the system too in greater numbers, and started taking over areas, like Game Creek. And we saw a shift in the bass population as the bowfin kind of pushed the bass out of the area, and then the snakeheads came in and pushed the bowfin out of the area. So it was kind of interesting. But yeah, a lot of the lower Delaware River, kind of tribs of the Delaware and impounded areas and marshy areas, and down in that section of Gloucester and Salem County, have really good bowfin populations.
Yeah, back to the question, like, are there any plans to kind of stock them more prevalently in North Jersey?
No, it's not a species that we stock or that we raise. It's even considered. We had a review of a Delphi, we call it our Delphi review of species, and looking at, we'll call in simplicity, it's kind of looking at, like, the native versus non-native species. And there was even debate about whether it's pretty much generally accepted that it's an introduced species and it's not even native to the state. Yeah.
I didn't know. Thank you.
Yep.
Steve D. Go ahead, Steve, if you're there.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. I have a question about I fish Oak Ridge Reservoir, and I know that's part of the Newark watershed, but I'm sure you're aware of how low they drained it.
Yeah.
I know they were doing maintenance, but is that fishery able to come back as far as the fish population? I mean, did they have to remove some? Are you aware of what's going on there?
Yeah, maybe Justin could maybe speak a little more. It's Justin's region. Maybe he could speak a little more on it.
Yeah. So yeah, we are aware of what's going on. We had some calls. It's just it's been so low because they've been doing some scheduled dam maintenance. I think they were doing some sort of replacement with the outlet structure. But we haven't really had any concerns about like the fish population there. There's still plenty of water, even though it looks like the surface area of the lake has really dropped down to what looks like nothing. There's still plenty of feet of water down there, so those fish are just pretty heavily consolidated for the winter for the time being. But as someone asked the question earlier today about Spruce Run Reservoir being down almost a similar level. We don't really have too many concerns about the fish population being able to rebound there. So, I think that with time we'll see some more as the water level comes back up. The reservoir should return to normal pretty soon, pretty quick.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was concerned about that.
No worries.
All right, I'm going to jump in at this point. So, our meeting was originally scheduled to end at 8:30, but I think we're all having such a great time. As you can see, we're all, passionate about what we do. We still have a lot of anglers on the line here. So what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to invite all of our staff to turn on your cameras. We're just going to, for the last few minutes here, we're just going to entertain any questions that you might have in regards to any cool water or warm water fisheries topic. Like I said, please hold any trout related questions for our meeting coming up on March 11th. That'll be trout focused. So yeah, if you have any additional questions across the gamut, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll do our best to answer.
All right, going back to the list, I see Douglas R. Your hand is raised. Go ahead, Douglas.
Yeah, Chris, on the invasive species, have you been monitoring, or is there any, the state of New Jersey monitoring the catfish, blue cat, and the flathead cat situation in the Delaware? Is that something that's taken place?
Yeah, so most of our work that we've done so far with the flathead, with any of the invasive catfish. So the one year that the blue cat, was reported to us, I think it was early, maybe 2021-ish. For the next couple of years after that, we did some electrofishing down in the lower part of the Delaware. Unfortunately, the current boat that we have, our electrofishing boat, is not the best at shocking in higher conductivity water. We're actually looking at purchasing another electrofishing boat that has a much better capacity for sampling in those water bodies. So that should change our whole realm of like what we're, our capabilities. We are setting up and looking to do some projects here over the next year, possibly doing some gill netting, looking for blue cats. We do find flathead catfish throughout the Delaware River, all the tributaries, and pretty much all of our surveys that we do, and in the lower from Trenton down, down south. I mean, they're pretty regularly, encountered at this point. Most of the time in pretty low density, just by the nature of like where catfish kind of hang and where it's effective for, where electrofishing is effective. They're usually big fish in low abundance. But we haven't really done a lot of work with our invasive catfish to date. But we're definitely excited, as we brought in more staff and we have more capacity. Yep.
Yeah, if I could contribute to that answer as well. So, there's only so much field work that can be done across a state. Even though New Jersey is a small state, there's still an awful lot of aquatic natural resources. So I just want to emphasize that, especially in the realm of invasive species, invasive fish, many cases anglers are our best eyes and our best ears. So if you or your buddies, happen to catch, some of those invasive fish, such as the blue cat, and blue cat were, particularly interested at, as a new invasive, or a recent invasion. So one of our biologists here, Sam, she's on the call here. She's been working with some staff to develop a web application for reporting invasive fish. So stay tuned for that in the upcoming months.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Doug. We'll continue down the list. Michael C. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, a question. The Salem Canal, I do fish there a little bit. It's near my house. And that's a really long area, miles and miles. Where were you guys surveying? I would imagine you're putting in off of Route 540 by Route 40 and heading towards the Delaware, or away from the Delaware.
Yeah, we typically sample upstream, so away from the Delaware.
Okay.
The bridge at 540 is actually, unless the water level is really low in the summer, we're not able. We have really high railings around the front of our electrofishing boat for safety.
Okay.
And it makes it so that it's too, the bridge is too low for us to get under.
Sure.
So we typically go the other way.
Okay.
And we sample at various sections. It depends on the year. Sometimes we'll start right at the boat ramp and go a couple miles upstream. Sometimes we go up into Game Creek, to the old boat ramp. Typically, and most of the time that most of our surveys, we'll kind of end our survey about what we call the log jam, past the Sportsman's Club ramp.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's about the farthest we can make it up in about a 2.5 hour survey. But we
Okay.
have gone up past that before. We've idled all the way up there, and our shocking boat that we have weighs so much that it makes it very difficult the canal's so shallow
Yeah.
that we pretty much have to idle the entire way. So it takes us quite a while to get up there, going 4 miles an hour, idling all the way up that distance. So,
Okay.
but that's generally the section that we sample.
Okay. That's where I put in at the Sportsman's Club and head
Yeah.
that way. So,
And
all right.
it's pretty consistent. Our sampling results are pretty consistent throughout the canal.
It's supposed to be a good fishery if you like fishing snakehead, they tell me. So I haven't tried that in a couple of years, but I think
There's a lot of them in there.
and everyone says they taste good. I don't know. So
It's
all
it's a
right.
very dense, flaky fish. We just recommend that currently there is not any specific consumption advisories on snakeheads.
Right.
So just be mindful of that when you're consuming fish from the waters where you're collecting them from, and particularly the Salem Canal.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I think the last hand we haven't called on is Robert P. Go ahead, Robert.
Hi, everybody. I don't really have a question. I just want to say thanks for all the work that you guys do, ladies do. I've been fishing the state forever, a long time now, 50 plus years, and always enjoy my time in the water and knowing that you guys have our backs, going out there. So just want to say thanks.
Well, I'm going to say that's a great way to end the meeting. We went a half an hour over, but I think it's time well spent. Thank you to all the staff for all the hard work, over the course of the year and putting this together. We really do take pride in making ourselves available to anglers for questions and discussion. So don't ever hesitate to call one of our field offices. Don't hesitate to shoot us an email. We're there to serve you, the angling public, and we definitely enjoy what we do and take it seriously. So on that note, you can remember that this meeting was recorded. You can find this and other public meetings on our website. It might be a little difficult to navigate at times, but if you just Google, New Jersey fishing forums, it'll take you right to that page. So share that with your friends. Let them know that they can catch up on this information. And once again, just want to thank everybody for your participation. It's nice to see a bunch of people, participating. We'll get some final numbers, but I saw, definitely in excess of 150 people on the call. So that feels like time well spent. Thank you and have a good night.